Well, good morning and welcome to this webinar on vendor hardware pricing. A topic that perhaps doesn't sound the most inspirational, but is really very important to not just the future of IT businesses like ours, but any business who's procuring IT hardware in the next 2 to 3 years. We've received a number of questions in recent weeks on the volatility that's happening in relation to hardware pricing. And many of you will know that this is caused by the precipitous rise in artificial intelligence, which is itself creating a demand for silicon. And so there's less silicon to go around effectively, and the big hardware vendors, in fact all the hardware vendors, are struggling to keep up with the demand from other consumers of IT hardware, other purchasers of IT hardware. And so I've got with me today James Pickering, who runs our vendor alliances team, and Alex Shimes, who's our head of procurement, to talk through some of the more specifics about what's going on in the market. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will have got a better idea of what the problem is, and also a better understanding of how you can mitigate some of the negative effects of that problem, and how we can help you, how Telefónica Tech can help you as a partner in mitigating those. It's important to note that the shortage that's being created by AI isn't just a short-term thing. It's something that the vendors are predicting will be a 2 to 3 year issue. So it would be wrong of any of our customers to think that, well, if I wait a couple of months, this will have fixed itself and we'll be back to normal again. The vendors don't think it will, and we're taking their guidance on that. So we want to get on the front foot, and we want to be open and transparent with you, our customers, about this situation and the impact. We're going to present you with a number of options and practical strategies rather than just the problem, so that we can all work in partnership together to fix it. Now, Alex and James will talk through in much more detail about what's happening. But from my perspective, it's important that you know that we are working very closely with our distributors, our vendors, and our global supply chain, using the power of Telefónica as an organization to try and secure allocations for our customers where possible. But the warning is, of course, it won't always be possible. So you should work with us to look at other strategies, look at different ways of doing things, different ways of achieving the business outcomes that you need. Your account manager should be speaking to you about the various options that are available. I'm going to put a few forward here. There's some obvious things that you can do alongside us to help mitigate some of the price rises and the potential delays that are caused by the AI shortage. Of course, you can order early. You can work with us on finding alternative configurations, silicon that might be more readily available if you just tweak the configuration, but still get the same business outcome. You can extend your support on your assets using our what we call entry-level managed service, kind of vendor-backed break-fix type services. Or you can consider using something like public or private cloud. And for those of you who've only ever purchased hardware from us before, it's helpful for you to know that we have our own private cloud environment, which we've invested heavily in the last few years. We've been lucky in a sense because we've invested in the hardware before the price increases. But there's the ability to move workloads, if they're suitable, onto our private cloud environment. And also to public cloud, to the hyperscalers that we support or we partner with, like Microsoft Azure and AWS. But of course, that in itself comes with a health warning, because Microsoft and AWS are suffering the same thing that we all are. And those of you who use Azure will know that there's been a restriction in Microsoft Azure South. We can tell you all of these things, and we can work with you on all of the options. But remember that there are various options available. There's always more than one way to achieve the result that you need to keep your business running as you wish. So I'm going to hand over now to James Pickering, who's going to talk you through in more detail what's happening.
Thank you, Chris, and morning, everybody. Should I say, my name is James Pickering, and as Chris said, I'm responsible for a number of our hardware vendors and the relationships we have with those organisations. It's clear that the market for hardware procurement, hardware supply has entered a new phase and has changed quite dramatically, and that change is impacting many organisations. In fact, I think it would be fair to say that any organisation who buys IT hardware right now will notice a shift in how they buy and availability and how they take delivery of that equipment. We're seeing a number of shifts in trends from all of the hardware vendors. It's important to stress that the things we're talking about today are not relevant to an individual vendor, but a number, almost all of the IT hardware vendors. We're seeing trends across the board. So we're seeing things such as price volatility, shorter quote validity. Excuse me, I haven't put my teeth in this morning. And of course, supply constraints. We're seeing quotes that are valid for significantly shorter periods of time. In some instances, that's days rather than weeks and months as it used to be. Lead times are fluctuating. And we are seeing a number of vendors adjusting their commercial terms, the terms that they agree with us and with you as end user customers are shifting. We can help you navigate the way through that, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. As I said, it's important to stress that this isn't an individual vendor related issue. This is across the board. Almost all of the hardware vendors are experiencing challenges right now. Our goal today is to explain how we can help you as end user customers in navigating these challenging times. As Chris said at the beginning, we'll give you a number of different options, a number of different ideas, a number of different ways of engaging with us, such that we can mitigate the risk. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So Chris talked at the beginning, the question on everybody's lips is, why is this happening? Why are we seeing fluctuations in pricing? Why are we seeing shortened quote validity periods? Why are we seeing lead times being extended or moved out quite dramatically? The biggest driver in that is quite simple. It is the explosion in demand for the AI infrastructures, the AI vendors buying up the silicon that Chris talked about earlier, buying up that silicon to power their data centers and their high performance compute environments that are required to deliver and meet the demand for the AI shift. We are seeing production being moved to support that demand from the AI vendors, which is having a knock-on effect elsewhere in the industry, causing shortages for the equipment that we're supplying to our customers on a regular basis. The manufacturers are prioritizing those environments. That's clear to see. And the availability of standard enterprise components, which we are dealing with day in, day out, is becoming significantly tighter and having a long-term knock-on effect. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, James, and good morning, everyone. I just wanted to spend a few minutes. Chris and James have spoken a little around why it's happening and touched briefly on what is happening. I want to spend a few minutes just talking about the detail behind what is happening and how it impacts you as our customers. Both Chris and James have mentioned shorter quote validity periods. That is a new reality that we all find ourselves in. The old sort of 30 or 60-day windows you may see from our vendors is very quickly become 14 days, with being the standard across most vendors, with some in certain aspects of compute even going down to 7 days. Coupling that with what is very clear as rapid pricing adjustments at this moment in time, which we're even seeing in some cases being week on week, double-digit and sometimes even triple-digit price increases being released by vendors on a far more regular basis. What we once used to see as quarterly price list changes are becoming weekly, and we are endeavoring to stay on top of that for you, and alongside your account managers are there to support you on that, which James will talk to a bit more in a minute. But it doesn't stop there. Once orders are placed, some vendors are changing their T's and C's onto us and then onto yourselves once orders are placed. And they come in two different flavors. One, some vendors are being a lot tighter around cancellation policies. So previously, if order was placed, it would go through and you'd eventually get your supply. Now some, because of the severe demand of some of these components, they are adding in cancellation rights within some of their deals if they think we are never going to get the supply. On top of that, whilst it's only a handful of vendors at the moment, there are a couple out there that have changed their T's and C's, enabling them to change their pricing post the PO being placed, which causes us and yourselves obviously big challenges. And these changes have mainly been implemented by vendors to manage risk in what is a very volatile environment, but it gives you, our customers, a lot more challenges. We can just move on a slide, please. For you, our customers, what this means. Some of these things are obvious. Hardware pricing is changing a lot more frequently, and it is making your budgets a lot more harder to plan for. It has made the situation a lot more complex for any organizations planning infrastructure upgrades or refresh programs. It changes your refresh cycles and your budget planning. And as Chris alluded to in his opening, this is not a short-term thing. This is a 2 to 3 year change. Now, lead times. James touched on this a little, but lead times across a lot of vendors are increasing. It is increasing in different sections of technology, compute being the hardest hit, and then storage and networking are starting to feel the brunt of it as well. But what was weeks is very quickly becoming months. And it is very reminiscent from a lead time standpoint of what we experienced during COVID. Chris outlined some of the things we could offer out to you as our customers, and what my advice would be on refresh cycle specifically is speak to our account managers, and early planning is definitely needed. Now, I'm going to hand back over to James, who's going to talk to you in a bit more detail around how we can help support you.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so how are we supporting our customers? It's all well and good us talking about what's happening in the world, but what are we doing about it? What's our value add to you as our end user customers? Well, as the price decisions and commercial terms, that's kind of outside of our control from a vendor perspective. So our role is to help minimize the risk, help minimize the risk of the changes impacting the projects that you're working on, help minimize the risk of the price being increased significantly, help minimize the risk of extended lead times, etc., etc. That is our role in this game. That it is to support you and help make things as smooth as possible. One of the key advantages that we provide is our breadth of vendor relationships. We work with the vast majority of hardware vendors and maintain close relationships with them, and of course with our distribution channel. That allows us to stay close to changes in pricing. We spend a lot of time constantly monitoring our vendor pricing and distribution stock levels. We're constantly engaged with our vendors to try and get early warning of upcoming price changes, which we of course then can share with our customer base. We're engaged directly with those vendors as well as those distributors. As I say, we're constantly monitoring stock channels and availability of equipment such that we can be bringing forwards projects where appropriate, or certainly talking about the possibility of extensions to rollout times and extension to or increases in pricing. We're also, because of our breadth of relationships in the vendor world, we can spot trends quite quickly. So vendor X makes a change, we're talking to vendors A, B, C, and D about that change and whether or not that they are going to follow. We can spot that quite early and again share that with you. Alex and his procurement team are constantly reviewing our open quotations such that we are able to proactively engage with our customer base. We're also constantly, as Chris alluded to at the beginning, constantly reviewing alternative solutions, which Chris is going to take you through again in a second in a bit more detail, but constantly looking at how we can mitigate that risk by looking at different configurations of equipment, alternative solutions, be it into our own hosted platform or into a public cloud environment, for example, but constantly looking at that, where our open quotations sit, what engagements we have with our existing customer base and indeed new customers who are coming to us with those challenges, but constantly talking. The key is in all of this is to be open, honest, and proactive with our base. Chris, I'll let you cover off a few more of the alternative solutions, if I may.
Thank you. So none of this makes for particularly happy listening. I know that. And there are elements of this that are just outside of all of our control. But what we can do is we can take certain aspects back into our control. We can work with you to plan really well. And we would urge you to make sure that you're planning years in advance now for your hardware purchases. So making sure you plan them ahead. If you've got a hardware refresh in a year, in 2 years' time, historically you may have been able to put that off until a few months before the refresh. Now that's not possible. So make sure you're planning in early, that you're getting pricing locked in as soon as possible, and that you're looking at alternative configurations, that you're tweaking the configuration that you're ordering to find the kind of best, the golden set of components that are available now, or at least available sooner. Make sure you keep talking to us about it. It's a moving picture. So we'll, as James has said, we'll have the latest updates from our supply chain, but we need you to keep in communication with us and not make any assumptions. Make sure you build flexibility into your budgets. Make sure your CFO is aware that actually the price that you've got from the vendor on day 1 might change on day 14. Make sure that your senior stakeholders who may be signing off the hardware purchases are themselves informed of the need for speed because of this issue. And by all means, show them this webinar, show them our slide deck, show them our publications on this, because this is not you trying to pull the wool over their eyes. This is a global thing and something that senior executives all have to react to. So make sure they're aware of that so they can make decisions swiftly, and that they give you the flexibility you need to accomplish the purchase. And then, of course, look at alternative solutions as well. I mentioned them earlier, but it's worth reiterating them again. Look at extended support, although bear in mind that only goes so far. Look at public and private cloud offerings. Remember that we have a private cloud offering in which we've invested millions of pounds to shore up. And we can, because we've done that, and because we own our own data center, we can we can mitigate some of the ill effects of the hardware price increases. Look at public cloud as well. Look at the hyperscalers, and just keep talking to us. Keep talking to your account manager. It's really important that you do that so that we can help you kind of minimize the impact to your organization. So that's it. Thank you very much for attending. We're going to move on to we're going to open the floor to some questions, and hopefully a few of you will have been posting in the chat already. And I'll get my esteemed colleagues to answer them. So the first question we have through is, do we expect hardware pricing to stabilize soon, or will volatility continue through 2026? James, can you take that one, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Chris. I think you summed it up quite nicely at the very beginning of this webinar. There are lots of rumours and conjecture and opinions of how long it will continue for. I think it's safe to say that we expect it to be the next 2 to 3 years. It certainly isn't going to be a 2026 thing. It will bleed into 2027 without question, and maybe even beyond that. It's very difficult to put a finite timeline on it, but I think it's safe to say that 2 to 3 years is a reasonable assumption.
Great. Stay on the line, James. I've got another question for you. Some of these might have been asked before we'd finished the presentation, so we may have covered them, but let's cover them again anyway. So the next one is, when should organizations start planning hardware refreshes given the shorter quote validity periods?
That's a really simple one for me to answer now, is the obvious statement. The sooner the better. We are seeing changes all the time, fluctuations in price, in validity, in timeframes. The sooner the planning starts, the better. So yeah, please come and talk to us right now if you're starting to think about any significant investment in the coming months.
Okay, loud and clear. third question, are some vendors less affected by some supply constraints than others? Alex, could I ask you to take that, please?
Yep, sure. I mean, in the reality, yes, but not to any, I suppose, great degrees. Every vendor is impacted by this. The compute vendors are hit the hardest so far, but networking, storage, and even device vendors are feeling it. I don't think anybody is not feeling the strain. There are some that are probably feeling it slightly less than others, but nothing major. Everybody is feeling this.
This is a great question. The next one. What are your thoughts on grade A refurbished IT? Alex, I think you're the man for that.
Yeah, I mean it is a hot topic. Customers do come to us with that, and if it's grade A refurbished through our vendors' channels, a lot of our vendors are offering these things out, refurbished parts legitimately procured via those vendors, where there's been refresh cycles or recycling given back to those vendors. It is 100% an option on the table, and pricing could be better and even more readily available. It's still not completely free from these from this situation, but it is something you can come and talk to us about, as vendors are actively pushing this as well.
I would add to that as well. Please make sure you're buying refurbished IT through legitimate channels. Quite clearly, we only buy them where our vendors permit us to. But if you go out to the market, there are sources from which you can buy refurbished kit, but that isn't always supported. And I mean, sometimes it can land you in hot water with the vendor, but even if it doesn't land you in hot water, you'll find when you come to raise a support case that actually it isn't supported in the way that you would hope. So hopefully I'm not scaremongering there, but the vendors are very tight on making sure that any refurbished kit goes through the right channels and has the right checks applied to it. The final question, how do I finance price increases? James, can I hand over to you for that one, and then maybe Alex might want to chip in as well.
Thanks, Chris. That's quite a tricky question. How do you finance a price increase? Short of going back to to your FD and saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" There are alternative ways. So there are a number of options in terms of leasing, in terms of vendor financial services agreements that can put in place to help with that increase and help spread that increase over a period of time. What I would say is that each individual circumstance will be different. My point from earlier about engaging early and coming to talk to us, we can bridge the gap between those price increases and help you over that hurdle. But come and talk to us. There are many different options that we can bring to the table, but it is again about early engagement, early conversation with both ourselves and our vendor community to find the most appropriate way to help over that bridge.
Just have one more question as well. Would leasing be a good option? James, it's attached to what you've just said.
Yes, undoubtedly be an option. Leasing and extended payment terms are all certain things that are on the table. And again, things that we can help you with should those conversations arise. But yes, leasing is definitely an option.
Well, thank you for all of those questions. They're excellent questions. They clearly show that you've understood the scale of the challenge that we all have in front of us. Thank you very much for attending our webinar today. We've just reached half an hour, so grateful for you spending your time on this, but I think it will pay back in spades. Have a great day ahead.